Fast forward a little bit, I thought this was just awesome. I recently saw a copy of a letter that he had written to two of his Marine buddies in 1980. At that point, the book was on the verge of being released. In that letter, he said he had spent the last several years obsessing about the most unpleasant years of his life, recalling events, names, and details of the most horrific things that had ever happened to him and his fellow Marines because he felt driven to tell the world what they experienced. The book was written, he said in this letter, and he was ready to lay down his pen and get on with his life. And this is what you were just talking about, to focus on his family, his career. Since he had it all down on paper, he felt he had done what he'd set out to do, divested himself of those things that were bottled up and trying to get out. Now he could forget about it and move on. In the fall of 2021, while preparing for a podcast episode, I found an old letter tucked inside the pages of The Old Breed, a history of the 1st Marine Division in World War II by George McMillan. Dated June 21st, 1982, this letter was apparently a response to the copy of my father's new book, With the Old Breed, that he had sent to McMillan for his review. Short and concise, it read. So just to set that up again, this book, The Old Breed, is I think it's like an authorized history of the 1st Marine Division in World War II.
Correct.
That's what this is. And it's an epic book. It's got pictures, it's got photographs, it's got drawings and paintings. It is an epic book. And it's almost the kind of book that, you would think would sit at the top of the hierarchy of books about this situation. And your dad gets this letter. It says, "Dear Gene, you've written a good book. It reeks with humility. It reeks with the humility of a good infantryman, one who has seen the worst of the battle. It is honest and it is true. The photo of you on the dust jacket is great. Made me nearly weep with nostalgia. Made me think of all the days I sat like that on my cot at Pavuvu. Something makes me think that the book is going to carve out a place for itself in World War II literature. You haven't heard the last of it. Let me know well in advance of the Bantam publication date. Maybe I can hit some kind of lick then. I'm honored you used Old Breed in your title and grateful for the dedication. Now write us another good book. Semper Fi, George." So he appreciated that he had used The Old Breed in the title. I mean, that's just an epic statement from McMillan.
So here's a bit of trivia. And Dave, you being a Marine aviator, have you ever heard of a book called History of USMC Aviation in World War II by Robert Sherrod?
I definitely know that book. I can't tell you the details. I mean, it's 100%.
It is. Yep. Robert Sherrod is who suggested to him.
Wow.
Okay, I remember my dad telling, because Navy.
Wait, Robert Sherrod has suggested use the name With the Old Breed?
To my dad, we'll use something The Old Breed in the title. I believe my dad told me that Robert Sherrod is the one who suggested to him that he do that. And that book, I mean, because World War II airplanes, World War II aviation, Marine aviators, Corsairs, I mean, I'm jumping ahead.
All in there too. Yeah.
And your dad got rejected. You talking here about, he got the rejection letter and your dad said, that's that. Then he heard from the third publisher, Presidio Press, the book was to be published. Need to cut it down to 300 pages, which we already talked about. And that's what got published from the original manuscript. You say this: my father's nightmares now rarely occurred. Visions of dead Marines rising out of their rain-filled foxholes in the shell-torn mud fields of Okinawa, forlornly silent, moving about in their lurid, eerie, greenish light of star shells swaying from their parachutes, the descriptions of which still move me to tears, seemed laid to rest. So your dad, you saw healing from your dad after the book came out. Is that an accurate statement?
I think that's accurate. And I talk about that. That is so powerful that, well, to stick to your question, I did see healing. I think when With the Old Breed got published, he hadn't been in touch prior to writing it with his former Marine buddies. And, I think I hear that from other veterans in their interviews that a lot of those guys came home and just got on with their lives. And my dad had not corresponded with Jay DeLoe or Bill Layden or Snafu, or Stumpy Stanley until he started writing With the Old Breed. And he reached out to them because he wanted them to be he wanted them to see what he was doing to make sure he did it right. And he would be the first guy to say, look, I was a 60 millimeter mortarman. The riflemen were the tip of the spear. We were right behind them. And as I found out from going through the unpublished material, there were a lot of times that the mortarmen were pulled into duty as riflemen. It happened on Okinawa quite a bit. But my dad, being the kind of guy that he was, as he pointed out in his book, the riflemen were the brunt of it. We were maybe 20 yards behind him or sometimes more. But to your question, Jocko, I did see healing. When With the Old Breed was published and began to garner attention, he began to get those phone calls, from fellow K Company Marines. And it was funny to watch that because my dad did not like to talk on the phone. But we'd be at the dinner table and the phone would ring, and he hated the phone anyway, but one of us would get it. Hey, Dad, it's for you. And he's like, oh, God damn. Or it'd be one of his buddies, Bill Layden or somebody, and he'd go in the other room and close the door and just be in there for 3 hours. And you'd hear him guff on and reliving the good stuff. And that was cool to see that.
Mm-hmm. So we kind of talked about how you move forward with this, and let's get into the book now itself. Pearl Harbor happens. Your dad was a freshman at Marion Military Institute, and on December 3rd, 1942, enlisted in the United States Marine Corps. And there's the whole backstory of his dad having been in the medical corps in World War I, and really not wanting your dad to go, but at least become an officer.
Right.
And just classic. You say, life as a college boy Marine, though easy, rapidly became intolerable. Half of the 180-man detachment, my father among them, deliberately flunked out so they could go into the Marine Corps as enlisted men. Soon enough, he was headed to Marine Corps boot camp in San Diego, California. It was there he would meet his drill instructor, Corporal Doherty, and become part of platoon 984. Just incredible. You had all these guys, what was it, 180 people, and half of them flail out so they can go into war immediately.
Yeah, so my grandfather my grandfather was not overseas. He stayed stateside during World War I, but he, back then they called them shell shock victims. Mm-hmm. And my grandfather dealt with a lot of shell shock victims. And of course, the guy who I think brilliantly plays my grandfather in the Pacific. Mm-hmm. And he says, Eugene, the worst thing about treating those victims from the Great War was not that they'd had their flesh torn, but their souls torn out. Mm-hmm. That is exactly the kind of thing, as we understood the kind of man my grandfather was, that he would have said. And I thought that scene was beautifully filmed and beautifully played by that actor. But my dad's older brother, my Uncle Edward, had gone to the Citadel and graduated and was an Army tank platoon commander on Sherman tanks. So, as my father put it, and I think he wrote this in With the Old Breed, and I quoted him saying it in my book. They said life would be more beautiful as an officer, so just don't enlist, But he was an impetuous youngster, as they all were, and
yes, indeed.